me because we had that stretch where it was me like every day of the week.
Are we live? Jordan? Yes, no? Yes, we're good. All right. Welcome back to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock show. All right, so we haven't talked about anything yet, so we're good to go. Wait for a second for everyone to get in here. Adam, while we wait for this room to populate a little bit, Jordan, yes or no? Did we go to a new link? Are we in a new room? Yes, we are. Okay. So we disconnected. We're in a new room. Let's tweet that new link out as well. I'm going to throw that out there on the Twitter machine just to make sure. Send me that link, Jordan, when you get a second so I can throw that out on YouTube. I don't know what's going on with Zoom lately. We might have to use something different. Whatever. Let's jump into it, Adam. Toronto, Boston, Game 6. I have Boston closing it out tonight, but that's besides the point. I think it should be competitive one way or another. And you and I both said before this game started, one thing we do know about this, because we're so deep into the series that there's only so much you can say, both of these teams are going to get monster minutes tonight in a do-or-die game for Toronto and a nail-in-the-coffin game for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, obviously when you get these teams, when you get this deep into the series, you pretty much know how rotations look. There is one kind of just element of the rotation that we saw last game that I think is interesting to at least pay a little bit of attention to, and it's that these teams did briefly play a little bit smaller than they had been. You saw a result in only about 9 minutes for Robert Williams. Brad Wanamaker played 28 minutes. That's part of that's deceiving because Jason Tatum was in foul trouble in the second quarter, and so Wanamaker stayed in, and then Wanamaker got a couple minutes of blowout run at the end. But you still saw Wanamaker get his minutes back, Robert Williams lose his minutes, and then on the other side with Toronto, you saw Norman Powell getting more run. He didn't really benefit from the blowout. He just played a ton. He played like 15, 16 minutes in the first half. You saw some stretches where neither of Gasol or Ibaka were on the floor, which obviously is unusual, but that's something to keep an eye on. You can at least, with it being a 2-game slate, we talk a lot about kind of finding narratives to make your lineups. You can at least play some lineups that, you assume the game goes smaller, you assume the game goes bigger. It is interesting we at least saw that. But other than that, you're right. It's just you're going to get tons of the main guys from both teams. You're going to get around 40 minutes from basically all the non-center starters on both sides.
All right, so let's take a look. Last game, just an absolute drubbing at the hand of the Raptors at the hand of the Boston Celtics, to the point where in a Game 5, you had Brad Stevens calling off the dogs, man. So did Nick Nurse relatively early in that fourth quarter. Did you? Obviously you saw this, but I'll mention it anyway. How about those rotations in the fourth quarter? He called it off and I guess said, hey, we'll get these guys rested and have them ready for Game 6, because I don't know how you see it, but that's the impression I got when Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis played the entire fourth quarter. Thomas played like 15, 16 minutes to close out the game. Chris Boucher played 9 minutes to close out the game. They completely called the dogs off, where Gasol, Siakam, Anunoby, Kyle Lowry didn't play a single minute in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty smart strategy. It's something that
you're not coming back from 30 points. It's not happening.
Yeah, we had talked about it. I don't remember when. I think it was like at the end of the seeding games when you had like Portland, Memphis, and whoever, San Antonio, I guess, like battling for that last spot. But I remember Portland was like, or no, it was the first game against Memphis of the fake best of 3 for Portland, and it was kind of like, if you're Portland, like they were down. It was like, if you're Portland, do you just back off and come back tomorrow rested, or do you actually run your guys out there? But I think it is a good strategy. If you're not going to come back in this game, why run your guys out there, especially when normally you get so many minutes from Van Vliet, Siakam, OG, Lowry. Like there's no reason for them to play those minutes if they don't have to.
There isn't. So, okay, let's do this. As of now, the line Boston laying 3 points, 209 total in this game. We've seen the total creep down throughout the duration of this series. It's at 209. So not expected to be a particularly high scoring game. The other game on the slate, 221. But let's kick it off with the Toronto Raptors, your quote unquote road team. Kyle Lowry, Van Vliet. Unless this game gets out of hand, and I have no reason to believe that it will, I'm going with, I have to assume that you're getting potentially 45 minutes from both of these guys. Is that outrageous to think? I'm not saying you have to project them for that much. but I could legitimately see 45 minutes for Siakam, Lowry, and Van Vliet.
Yeah, I think that, it's not where I would go as far as a median projection, like you said.
No, of course not.
But yeah, it's not like it would be surprising at all. And it's why you can project like 42 minutes for them, because 45 is very clearly there in the range of outcomes. 42 isn't the top. So I think projecting 40 to 42 minutes for these guys makes a lot of sense. And it's going to make them look like good options. One thing, I guess, kind of overarching to touch on is I said yesterday I didn't really love game stacking as much as I normally do on 2-game playoff slates because of how value kind of broke down all coming from Milwaukee. I feel differently today. Now we're back to another slate where I'm going to try and correlate my lineups a little bit more because, like you said, you have a relatively low total in this game, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be low scoring, but it's obviously you just want as much of whichever game is higher scoring as you can get. And so I think getting, 5 or 6 plus guys from the same game makes a lot of sense on a slate like this. So I am going back to that.
All right, talk to me about the rest of the Toronto Raptors. What are your projected minutes for them? It hardly matters, but I'm curious to know where you're coming in. Are you giving them 40, 41?
Yeah, I went 40 on Siakam, 41 on Lowry, 43 on Van Vliet. But those are also kind of just massaged to get the projections basically just in the order they should be, because I think that all three of those guys are essentially the same in terms of median projection and range of outcomes. And so the minutes are kind of adjusted just to make it so that, Van Vliet and then Siakam and then Lowry are projected in that order, but pretty closely together, because otherwise it'll just kind of screw up my exposures.
All right. Well, then you got into it a little bit here, but let's break it down. Ownership right now, we do have, let me see when our last update was. I'm going to refresh this just to make sure we're all on the same page. Awesemo.com. You know where to get the ownership player projections, all of them created, used by Alex Baker, #1 DFS player himself, and put onto the site for you to use as well. If you haven't used that promo code SLEEPER yet, it's the last day you can use it. SLEEPER. Get you 25% off NFL Awesemo Plus subscription, plus the NFL Draft Kit, Fantasy Football Best Ball Draft Kit, completely free, and a $35 free credit to FFPC where you can draft best ball lineups. I've said it a million times as well on DraftKings right now. You've got some super soft best ball contests. All of those free tickets coming right back into the pool and opening it up. Adam, I told you I got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the third, Devontae Adams in the second, and Alvin Kamara in the first. I know you're pissed, but there's literally no better time to use best ball content to draft a good team right now. There's no better time to get in on best ball contests. It's just the truth.
Yeah. I mean, probably get in my face a little bit, but you're right.
I got to sell product, bro.
If you still have access to the $20 tournament on DraftKings and you're planning on playing best ball over on the fence, you should be doing it.
Yeah. In all seriousness, though, we put an awesome product together, and it's all analytic, data-driven, none of it groupthink. Alex Baker, everything that made him a #1 DFS player, he put that into this product, into our NFL fantasy football stuff, and we're going to have stuff throughout the year, so check it out. It's an $80 value for $38. Once you factor in the $35 credit to FFPC, you're basically paying $3 for all of this for a full calendar month. The fantasy football products throughout the entire season as well. Use the promo code SLEEPER. It expires today, so you got a few hours left on that. Okay, where was I? Ownership, right? Ownership on this game specifically will filter out Toronto and get your take on this, where you think you're coming in against the field, because really that's all that matters. So right now, highest ownership for Toronto, Siakam 44%, Lowry 39%, Van Vliet 39%, Gasol 37%, Norman Powell 27%. And one thing about the Raptors that's interesting is your average fantasy production, right, for Siakam, Lowry, and Van Vliet, particularly with Siakam not really producing much in the postseason, it's so similar. You don't really get a huge disparity from game to game there, and it's hard to get a big difference in projection from them from any given night.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really where ownership is the most useful, is when guys either their median projections are similar, but more importantly the range of outcomes, and that's the case here. I did a crunch before the show, and one thing to keep in mind, so it's not perfect as far as how my ownerships or my exposures would turn out, because I did force game stacks. But kind of looking at those three, right now we have the same projected ownership on Lowry and Van Vliet on DraftKings. I got the same amount of aggregate ownership between them, but I went a lot higher on Van Vliet because he is cheaper. He obviously has a slightly higher chance of paying off that salary than Lowry does, and they're getting the same ownership. So it got me more Van Vliet. That's something that if the ownership changes a little bit, so will my exposures. And then Siakam, the highest owned out of the three, I still got to Siakam, but I was getting a lot less than the field just because he's getting so much ownership, and you can go to other forwards on this slate. So I was getting the most out of Van Vliet, then Lowry, then Siakam.
What about Marc Gasol at his price point here? He's still pretty popular. All of these guys on DraftKings are 37% or higher. The only starter below that is $5,700 Anunoby.
Yeah, so this is where he's one of the guys where I think if I had just run my crunch, not setting any rules or anything, I'd gotten more than I did because he's an okay value. But because I prioritized game stacking, I got to some of the lower owned Clippers Denver game. But as far as Gasol goes, it's kind of just the same story that we've seen. You're expecting mid-20s in minutes. You're expecting him to suck. And it's just a matter of, does he do well enough to justify the salary? Because the salary is inexpensive. He's only $4,100 on DraftKings. The problem is that, he's going to be a lower usage option than Lowry, Siakam, Van Vliet, potentially Anunoby. He's splitting minutes with Ibaka. You got some minutes last game where they went small without either one of those two on the floor. Not sure if they'll do that again since they got destroyed, but there's obviously a lot of things that can go wrong for Gasol, whether it's his minutes or just the fact that he hasn't played very well from a DFS standpoint. But he is cheap. He's coming in at about 37% ownership, like you said. So a lot of ownership going there. I would, if it stays there, I would rather pivot to some lower owned value just because I don't think Gasol is much better than anyone else. But certainly one of the point per dollar values that you'd be getting to just because there's a lack of options.
All right, last one here. What about Serge Ibaka? He will play. He won't have a minutes limit. He's coming off playing 22, and 19 minutes. Bench players usually struggle, or bench players suffer the most when it comes to blowouts, right? They're not going to get that last rotation. We know that. The same can be said for Serge Ibaka last time out. It's not that he would have played a whole lot more minutes, but his rotation was definitely cut short in the fourth. Now you've got him coming in. Nick Nurse says there will be no limitations, but he already hasn't been playing a ton of minutes. Does he look to use him more in this game, or is Ibaka at this price point just pretty untenable to get to, knowing that he really hasn't been getting a lot of run to begin with?
It's a tournament-only play, and I say that not as, a lot of people say it as, well, if he's not a cash play, he's a tournament play. But he's someone that his median projection isn't very good for his salary because of the minutes. Like you said, he only played about 9 first half minutes last game, got to 18 in the game. But it's not even really like he got shorted in the second half. He just didn't play a lot, played 22 in the first couple of games. His median projection isn't going to look great at 5,500, but he is such a good player on a per minute basis that if the rotation is slightly different or Gasol gets in foul trouble or any number of things happen and Ibaka suddenly plays even 27 or 28 minutes, he's probably going to be a really, really good value, a really, really good play at low ownership. So purely a tournament play for me, but someone that I think is somewhat appealing there because you think about the center options on this slate. Obviously you have Jokic at the top, who's great, but then beyond that, Marc Gasol, not that appealing. Zubats is fine, but he has his own question marks. Daniel Tice, same goes for him. It's not like you have a slate full of really good centers. You basically have Jokic and then a bunch of guys that you're just rolling the dice on. So going to a lower owned Ibaka that does have monster upside if he somehow finds a way into his minutes does make sense in tournaments. It's just something that you have to understand that the probability of that happening is relatively low, even though it's probably higher than his ownership suggests.
You have any other thoughts outside of these guys for the Toronto Raptors? Anyone we haven't touched on yet? Want to make sure we get to everybody here.
Yeah, you need to mention Norm Powell at 3,900 as well. He wasn't playing much early in the series, but last game, because that rotation was a little bit different, like I said, he played about 16 minutes in the first half, finished the game with 31 and a half minutes. Who knows how that rotation looks here? I don't want to rely too much on what happened in a game where Toronto lost by 30, but he did get more run. He's obviously someone that during the regular season and just in general typically gets more run than he's been getting. So I have him at like 24 minutes right now. Basically, the same as Ibaka. he's not someone I'm confident in, but he does have a really wide range of outcomes since we don't really know where the minutes are going to come in. Like if he plays 28 plus minutes at 3,900, he should be a really, really good value again.
On the other side, Kemba Walker, last game, 36 minutes. He was pacing 40 minutes for the second straight game, 39 minutes the game prior to that. Look, last game was pretty ugly, and game one was also pretty ugly. They beat them. I think it was an 18-point victory. The two games Toronto won, one was by a point on a OG Anunoby prayer on that Kyle Lowry inbound that wasn't even drawn up for him. And then the next game, I'll say they won convincingly, but the point I'm getting to here, Adam, is Boston has dominated this series. And in two of the three games they won, they smoked Toronto, right? And then the other game that they won was a 3-point margin. Toronto had a good chance to win that. If Siakam didn't step out of bounds, it could be a different story. But in the games Toronto's won, been razor thin margins. Again, I think Boston pulls away with this one, puts their foot on the gas, and I expect to see equally huge minutes from guys like Kemba and from Jason Tatum and from Jaylen Brown pretty much across the board today, even getting someone like Daniel Tice coming in and probably pulling another 30 minutes. I just expect the median outcome for a lot of these Boston players is similar too, though, which makes it strange. And a lot of times that'll force you just to go with what works best at the position or whose price is best. But yeah, I see them all getting a ton of minutes, putting their foot on the gas and pulling away with this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. None of the main Boston guys look like particularly bad plays. None look like great plays at their respective salaries, with the exception of Jason Tatum, who is the most expensive. But I think at 9,300, Tatum looks like a really good option. The problem you run into is that you also have Jokic up there. You have Kawhi Leonard up there, who also I think are kind of underpriced. So it'll be tough to get tons of Tatum just from a salary standpoint and a roster construction standpoint. I think that Kemba, Brown, Smart are more or less priced where they should be. So yeah, it just comes down to kind of what we talked about with the Toronto side and what you were just saying, where ownership really matters because the range of outcomes is about the same. Like you're not going to be surprised at all if Kemba beats Brown today or vice versa. Marcus Smart, obviously a little bit cheaper and doesn't have quite the same range of outcomes, but relative to his salary, he's projects about the same. So it's just a matter of within your lineup, what position do you need? How's your total ownership look? If you have a really chalky team and you need to get to one of these guys, then go to the lowest owned one, and it's pretty much that simple. If you're contrarian elsewhere, then it's more about how much salary do you have left, and then who's the highest projected guy, which outside of Tatum I think is Kemba, but obviously also is the most expensive. But none of these guys really separate themselves when you factor in position and salary.
They don't. No, and if you're talking ownership again, by the way, I should have mentioned this respect or relative to the slate itself and not just the Raptors, but Siakam right now is getting more ownership than anybody else on this slate. Kyle Lowry's third, Van Vliet is fourth, and Lowry is fifth. So right. that wasn't just like, oh, there's a bunch of guys up there in the 30s. Adam, they're 1, 3, 4, and 5 projected ownership. And granted, it's tightly grouped in the top 10, top 15. They're all Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, which is why I said that when I allude to my exposures, to kind of take it with a grain of salt, because I did game stack. And so because Toronto as a team is getting as much, or this game is getting so much ownership, I'm naturally just going to have more exposure to the late game than this game, just because everyone's so popular.
I just want to read off some exposures for you on Boston and let you run with it. Tatum, 33%. He's up at 9,300. Jaylen Brown, 7,600. Jaylen Brown, 29%. Smart's at 29. Tice is at 29. Kemba's at 29. The four of those are within less than 1.2 percentage points from Jaylen Brown down to Kemba Walker. Difference there. Expand on that a little bit, how you deal with something. Do you just get pretty flat exposures when it comes to these guys, or how do you work with something like this?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing is, what position do they play? Because if you have like a really weak power forward position, then obviously you would prioritize Tatum and Siakam. But also, it's just kind of their salaries relative to each other. Like I mentioned with Lowry and Van Vliet, if they're going to get the exact same ownership, I'm going to just prioritize the cheaper one because he has a slightly better chance of paying it off, and the ownership's the same. If Van Vliet's ownership goes up some, though, then I'm going to get more Lowry because, again, they're really close in terms of expectation. But it's also, and, like I mentioned, I like the idea of just kind of going heavier on the later game because of just how much ownership is concentrated in this game. If this game just turns into, a defensive struggle and neither team is knocking down their shots, you're going to be in a really, really good position going into that late game when so much of the field has either game stacks of this game or at least large percentages of their lineup tied up in it.
Right. Yeah. Top options from Boston. Who do you have?
Tatum, Jalen, Tice, I think, are the easiest to get into your lineups. Brown, I say Brown because of the guard forward eligibility. So I would say those three, then Kemba, then Smart.
Okay. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Hopefully everybody's back in the room since we dropped that stream. Sorry about that. Things happen. I don't know what's going on lately, man. Just bad luck. It wasn't my fault that time, though, so we're in good shape. Anyway, hit that thumbs up. It helps us a ton. It helps us continue doing this for free. And really, with this YouTube algorithm, man, they don't like the little guys, So you guys got to help us put that work in so we can get out there to more eyeballs and spread Awesemo.com and all of our shows across the globe. Subscribe, hit that notification bell too if you haven't done so yet. It helps us greatly so you always know when new content is going to drop next. All right, Adam, let's go on to game 2 if you're ready.
Yep.
LA Clippers, Denver Nuggets. Well, this has been a strange series, to say the least. Got smoked in game 1. In game 2, they come back, they pull off the victory, right? They get a 9-point win. In game 3, you could tell it was trending to where they were just going to kind of unravel at some point. There's too much firepower with the LA Clippers, and they ended up losing this one 113-107. But they stayed competitive up until the final few minutes of the fourth quarter. And then again, the Clippers just have too many good players. I think you're going to see more of that today. Clippers laying 7.5 points, 221 total. All in all, it's a very strange sight, this Clippers team, Adam, because Lou Williams has not been shooting well at all. Like Lou Williams shooting has not helped them. If anything, it's made it more difficult for them to get back into the mix or into competition in a couple of these spots. Paul George is the reason they won last game, was dominant down the stretch, while somebody like Kawhi Leonard was missing quite a bit of shots, turned it on a little bit late, but didn't have his best game. The point I'm trying to make is they have so many different ways that they can contribute on this team, from Morris to Lou Will to Howard or to Kawhi Leonard to Paul George, that they're going to be able to put points up in bunches, and there are going to be games where the Clippers rattle off 130 points, 125 points in regulation.
Yeah, no question. And there's a couple of reasons outside of the ownership that I already talked about that I do prefer going to the stars from this game. And obviously that starts with Kawhi and George. So George is basically the same price point as guys from that Boston-Toronto game, Kemba, Lowry, a little bit more expensive than Van Vliet, but basically same price point as those guys. I think that even though the Clippers do have so many good players, the production is still mostly concentrated to Kawhi and George here. Whereas with Boston, you have Tatum, Kemba, and Jaylen Brown all getting up a bunch of shots. Marcus Smart gets some as well. So a little less concentrated with Boston, I think, than the Clippers, and the salaries are pretty close, at least relative to George. But then also when you think about Kawhi, whose salary is more expensive, the mid-range on this slate is kind of non-existent for the most part. Like, you have Marcus Smart at 6,500, but for the most part, it's just a bunch of guys like 7,500 plus or like 6K or less. So I think that you kind of naturally get forced onto going to some cheaper plays anyway, which makes it not that difficult to get to Kawhi over some of the Toronto Boston guys, for 1,500 or 2K more. So I think that from a roster construction standpoint, that becomes a little bit easier as well. So I'm getting to a lot of them, ownership, and just the fact that there's a little bit less production's less distributed to multiple guys on this team.
So as of now, I know you crunched some lineups prior to this. How much Kawhi Leonard are you looking at?
In the ones that I did before the show, I got to 65% Kawhi, 73% George.
Did you ever think the day would come where you'd have 65% Kawhi at 10,300?
Man, if I ever start rostering Noah Syndergaard, it's going to be bad.
I know. That's the way it is, but it makes sense to me. The Kawhi Leonard ownership here, you laid it out nicely. But when you're looking at a slate, and let me just get off of LA and look at this slate as a whole. When you're looking at a 2-game slate, and Kawhi Leonard is like 20th in projected ownership, how much does that have to do with your willingness just to say, screw it, I'm going to load up on him because he is overall the best player in all of these 2 games combined?
Yeah, it's a big part. That the ownership is a huge reason why I'm so heavy on this game relative to the first game. But also it is, like I said, with roster construction, like take Jason Tatum at 9,300, for example. He projects really, really well for me. Kawhi obviously projects better in terms of raw points. And if I get Tatum in a lineup, because there's nobody really at like 6,500 that I'm just like, oh, I really want this guy. It's not a big deal if I'm going from some $4,800 guy that I don't really like to a $3,800 guy that I don't really like to get more points from Kawhi Leonard. So that's what I think also plays a really big role. If I loved Paul Millsap and hated, I don't know, whoever the $3,800 equivalent is, it would be different, but I don't. I think that most guys on this slate, like 5K and less, are not that great. So I don't really mind just playing the least expensive ones and getting more points from Kawhi.
It's pretty wild too. You look on FanDuel at small forward, and Kawhi Leonard is the 4th highest projected owned small forward on a site where you have to play 2 of them on a 2-game slate.
That is pretty crazy.
Right? Jeremy Grant, 61, Siakam. So there's one of your reasons. 54, Jaylen Brown, and then Kawhi. Basically the same ownership as Kawhi or OG Anunoby. So, take that for what it's worth. I think I think you're on the right track there for sure, relating to Kawhi and Paul George. Now, you're right. The production, generally speaking, is going to be concentrated between those guys. They're definitely going to get off or have the highest usage, get off the most shots, and give you the most well-rounded numbers. There are other players on this team, which on a 2-game slate bears expanding on or upon, that can go off and have some pretty good games. Lou Williams has struggled, but he is one of them. Patrick Beverley, I tell you, I credit Patrick Beverley. He's made some really fantastic defensive plays over the past game or few games that have made a huge difference in the way that they flipped, specifically in game 3. He's really cheap, 21 minutes. Do you see him getting more minutes in a spot like this? So basically talk to me about the role players for the LA Clippers. We've already covered Kawhi and Paul George.
Yeah, so I think Beverly looks like one of the best values on the slate. Obviously, that comes with the caveat that they've said he's going to be on a minutes restriction for the foreseeable future. He played about 21 minutes last game. I have him in for the same here. But, his numbers for the season when he's played alongside Kawhi Leonard, he's averaged 0.85 DraftKings points per minute. He's only 3,600 and values just there on a 2-game playoff slate. So I think Beverly's getting a lot of ownership. I think he deserves it. He's a very good point per dollar projection. You do run into the problem of like how high is his actual ceiling if he's only playing 20 to 22 minutes. Does it justify the ownership? But I think that given the relatively low ownership on other pieces of this game, I don't mind going to Beverly. JaMychal Green obviously is a pivot that you could go to. I have him projected a couple points below Beverly, but also getting a lot lower ownership. So, you can keep that in mind. The center position is kind of interesting because Zubac's fouled out of last game, but we had talked before about kind of having to guess at what the center rotation was going to look like at the end of the game. They were trying to close with Zubac. He fouled out, but they need him to match up with Jokic if he can. He played 21 and a half minutes.
That posterizing dunk he had, though? It's pretty sweet.
Zubac?
Yeah.
No, I saw Porter's. I didn't see Zubac.
Oh, yeah. Zubac had a nasty one. Looked like he came in from the free throw line. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because Porter's was what, on Harrell or on Zubac?
Yeah. I think it was Zubac's only field goal attempt in that game.
Oh, wow.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, Zubac played 21 and a half minutes, but he picked up 2 fouls in his first 2 minutes and 47 seconds of the first quarter. He fouled out with 4 minutes and 7 seconds to go. I'm not projecting him for, 28 minutes, but I think that's firmly in his range of outcomes if he doesn't get in foul trouble. I think it was big to see that they were trying to close with him and match up with Jokic. So I think he pretty much plays as much as he can. I have him in for, I think, 25 minutes here. But it certainly could go higher if he can stay out of foul trouble, and he's relatively inexpensive. Harrell is also inexpensive, but has just been playing absolutely awful since coming back to the bubble. Part of that, I don't know how much of that has to do with conditioning and the fact that he missed so much time, but he's just been really, really bad from both a basketball standpoint and a DFS standpoint. His rebounding numbers are down, but not only that, his expected rebound percentage is down. His expected assist percentage is down based off of potential rebounds and potential assists. Just everything across the board for him looks pretty bad. So he kind of just falls into the category of he's really cheap. We know that he has the potential. He hasn't shown the ability to do it anytime recently. So he has at least some merit because of how cheap he is, and the fact that he does have a track record of being a good permanent player, even though he's been terrible recently. But you can't really go there with confidence because the minutes are a question and his ability to play basketball right now is a question.
So is the price worthy of getting to? That's the simple question here.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one where you're going to focus really heavily on the ownership. Right now, we have him projected for 20% ownership, so I would have like 10%. I just don't have him projected well enough to really justify that ownership when I can go to some other guys at that price point. Like, I would rather go to Zubats for 500 more, getting similar ownership. Like, Zubats is 21%, Harrell's 20 right now. I'd just rather have more Zubats.
Anyone else from the clip?
I think that's about it.
All right, let's cover Denver, then we'll get to your guys' questions. We'll have a few minutes to do so. We'll start with Jokic. Let's start with him and Murray. Nikola Jokic has been we knew the offense needed to run through Jokic if they were going to have any shot of success. And the first game was an utter disaster. He still got up 14 shots, but the last two games, look how involved he's been, Adam. Michael Malone knows that if you're going to stay competitive, Nikola Jokic has to be the guy that the offense runs through. And they've had success with that over the last two games.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of what we saw last series. Like last series, Utah had Gobert that can, kind of make life difficult for Jokic, and they just had no answer for Jamal Murray, who was just getting wide open looks off, in the pick and roll. Now in this series, you have a team that has difficulty matching up with Jokic, and you have Paul George chasing Jamal Murray all over the floor and making life miserable for him. So whereas last series you saw Jamal Murray just dominating usage and being the guy, now you're back to Jokic because he has the more favorable matchup. The Clippers have the length to make things really difficult for Murray. So I do buy into Jokic being back to being like the number one guy here. Obviously, he is very involved in terms of rebounding and assists, but also the usage should be there. He should lead this team in usage rate, and he's relatively inexpensive. He's a little bit less than Kawhi. He's a little bit more than Tatum. But again, too, with the center position on the slate being so weak, I think that getting to a lot of Jokic makes sense.
How about Murray? And I actually want to get to some questions, so I'll let you take the floor here, and then we'll close it out with some questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of plays here that I think are really interesting from ownership. Murray, you can't question his ceiling, but I do think he's overpriced for this matchup. His price is still up from the series against Utah where he was doing whatever he wanted. That's not the case here. His usage rate's down at 24.5% for the series. He's contending with a lot of Paul George defensively, which is a problem. So I do think you're overpaying for him, and that would be fine if the ownership were low. But right now we have him at 30-something% ownership, 34%. That's higher than I want to go to for a guy that I know I'm overpaying for. Jeremy Grant is getting a lot of ownership, I think deservedly so. He's just a good value play, playing 40-plus minutes. Millsap played 28 and I think 31 minutes. He doesn't really do a whole lot anymore from a fantasy production standpoint, but he's certainly someone that's useful in your lineups. But where I do think you can take some tournament stands are Michael Porter Jr. and Monte Morris. There's obviously huge concerns with both of these guys as far as playing time goes. We've seen Porter have trouble staying on the floor defensively, but the thing with Porter is that he is really good offensively. He provides scoring that Denver needs, especially if they're behind in games. So the range of outcomes for him is pretty wide. We actually saw him close last game over Paul Millsap. I wouldn't play him with Millsap, but even if you project like 24 minutes for Michael Porter, he ends up coming in, with like a 5x projection, and there's the upside for more, and he's only getting about 14% ownership right now. Monte Morris at 3,700, you're only expecting around 18 minutes for him, but he's got a usage rate north of 20% for this series. His expected assist percentage is up over 20% as well. He doesn't project much differently from Pat Beverly, but Pat Beverly's 3 times his own. You can either pivot to Morris or you can play them both together and get a lower own value in Morris, where you're just kind of hoping he runs into a couple extra minutes for one reason or another. So I don't think Porter or Morris are really high percentage plays, but I do think they both, at their respective price points and ownership, are the kind of guys that can win you a slate.
What about, did you mention Gary Harris? Yes, I was trying to accumulate some questions in chat here.
No, I didn't. Harris is
only because he did play 35 minutes last game, low usage, but he's still there,
Yeah, the minutes were huge. The one thing, looking at DraftKings pricing, he jumped from 4,100 to 4,600, which doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it's a pretty sizable jump in terms of percentages. He's getting not as much ownership today as he did last game. See, he's another guy that just kind of, if I'm playing 150 lineups, I would get the sum, because I do expect 34, 35 minutes. In 3 max, I don't expect to get to Harris.
All right. Anything else here before we get to the chat and take some questions in Super Chat and obviously our premium Slack chat?
Nope.
All right. Let's see. Would you play Beverly and Green together?
I think it's not optimal, but with how cheap they are, I think it's okay. The reason it's not optimal is because it's really unlikely they close together, because you assume all of Morris, George, Leonard, and whoever I'm forgetting. Williams, I think, close. So it's unlikely they close together. You could see Beverly close over Williams. But because of how cheap Beverly is, I don't mind it. I did set a rule to only have one of Green, Zubats, and Harrell.
Okay. Kurt asks Gasol or Harrell. One of the big differences there too is that Gasol's getting a shit ton of ownership.
Yeah. I would lean towards Harrell just because of the ownership, but they kind of both have the same problem, right? You don't really know how many minutes they're going to play, and They're both playing like they're 87-year-old men.
Except one of them is and one of them isn't.
Right.
All right. Let's see here. Walker or Lowry in a single entry tournament?
I would lean. Kemba's a little bit lower owned, but I would still lean towards Lowry.
All right.
I just think he gets a couple more minutes.
OG or Porter on Yahoo, they're both $21. I say that's good because I think one of them just has a significantly higher ceiling, but the other one is pretty much locked into play. I shouldn't actually not locked into play, but should play a lot of minutes in Anunoby.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's for ownership considerations, I would go to Anunoby just because you're in terms of median projections, you're probably talking about 15 to 16 more minutes for Anunoby.
All right, let me get to some of our chat, premium Slack chat. Let's see what we've got here. I want to make sure we get to you guys. Do any rules stand out for you on FanDuel? Double AP asks Adam.
I don't have anything FanDuel specific, but I mentioned having one of Green, Harrell, or Zubats. Wouldn't want more than one of Ibaka, Gasol either. I don't want more than one of Robert Williams and Brad Wanamaker, the two kind of cheap guys on Boston.
Okay. TJ asks if Robert Williams is in play tonight.
If you're playing a bunch of lineups, you can take a shot because there is uncertainty in that rotation. But based off of what we saw Boston do last game, I would feel a little bit better about Wanamaker. I don't like Wanamaker or Williams, but we did see Boston go a little bit smaller and Wanamaker get more minutes at the expense of Robert Williams, who only played about 9.
All right. And we already got to the answer when it came to Pat Beverly. We got a couple minutes to go here. Remember, friends, this is a combined show. MLB Live Before Lock is coming up next. You're going to be graced by the presence of our own EMac and Greg Ehrenberg. Wait, hold on. Greg does baseball?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Jack of all trades, this guy. I didn't know Greg was doing baseball. That's pretty cool. All right. Anyway, what else do we have? Tice or Ibaka on FanDuel Cash? In Cash, it's got to be Tice.
Yeah, just for the minutes.
Yeah. Is it bad I'm not getting to any Boston guys? That's a good question for you because you already said your exposure to them was going to be a little lower than the second game.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, I guess, depends what you mean. Like, if you're not getting there because of ownership considerations, then no, it's not bad. If you're not getting there because, like, you have really low projections on them, then your projections are probably bad. But, yeah, I think that if you're not getting there kind of like strategically because they're really popular, I think that makes a lot of sense.
All right, last one. Andrew says, touch on Boucher. There isn't really much to touch on with Chris Boucher, Adam, but Andrew's an avid listener. He's a regular here on the Awesemo YouTube channel.
Boucher would be interesting if Ibaka were out, but with Ibaka in, Boucher shouldn't play.
Right.
Yeah, so.
That's it. All right, let's do one more. Pat Beverly minutes limit. I don't see why he would play a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, they said minutes. I don't remember the exact wording, whether it was restricted or monitored, but they said for the foreseeable future.
The dreaded minutes monitored,
yeah.
Huh? All right. Last one. Oh, okay. Roy here's a good one. Who is the top star player to fade? And by fade, we're just going to assume get a lot less of than others, or maybe not play in a 3 max,
I would say Siakam, just because he's the highest owned right now, and I think you can pivot to plenty of other guys.
All right. And who's your favorite value play?
None. I guess Pat Beverly.
Okay.
Just because he is so cheap.
Oh, okay. Last one. I'm sorry, guys. I just, I'm a man of the people. What can I say? Can we get these likes up, please? We're at 1533. I don't want to Josh Engelman you. I don't want to. I'm not trying to beat you. I'm not trying to bludgeon you with likes, but this is just insulting. 200 likes. We love you guys. Show some love back. Harris or Millsap?
I would lean toward Millsap. Don't feel real strongly one way or the other, but you do at least get Millsap, playing closer to the basket, more rebounding opportunities. Harris is basically just out there to get steals and knock down threes. All
right. And no, Andrew, hardly a jab at Josh. That's my boy. That's my boy. Nobody can garner likes like that, man. It's a very special skill that I don't have, and I have most when it comes to hosting. Thanks for watching.
And Josh doesn't have many others.
I didn't hear you. We're coming up next with Greg and EMac, MLB Live Before Lock. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the NBA Live Before Lock show, presented by No House Advantage. Remember, Awesemo promo code $20 in free cash when you sign up. Download that app. Check it out today. No House Advantage, sponsor of the Live Before Lock show. Peace. Have a good show, EMac.
Love the hot mic, Sloppy.
What does it matter?
We're professionals here. We'll do it live.
This is professional. I want to see it cold open. Amen. Thanks, Jordan.
All right, everybody, here we are. It's your old pal EMac, joined by Greg Ehrenberg, as we are following Laffy, Dave Loughran, and of course Adam Scherer, my money Scherer. Laffy loves to play to the hot mic. We know it's live. We're just having some fun with you. Greg, hardly recognize you, my man. What happened? Did you step outside of the quarantine, or is this a self cut here?
A little bit of both. So I was at Costco getting groceries, and first of all, my hair was like egregiously long before, but I was in Costco and just going through, and they have everything there. And I just happened to walk past one of those like razor kits.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I should probably cut my hair, and then I did that. So a little impulsive. That's how I do a lot of my doings though. So that's how it came to be.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I'm here in a hotel down on a beach town, trying to get away from a little bit of the humdrum life here. I hadn't had a day away from work, the day job, since before all the fun hit in March. So missed out on 2 vacations. My wife said, "Hey, let's go take a little one at least." So here we are down enjoying the beach. It's raining right now, so I'm inside doing a little DFS. Basketball locks in 8 minutes. If you guys have that, Serge Ibaka is going to play. There is not going to be any minutes limit for him at this time. So we'll have to see if he does play, but that is the one question mark, and then everything else is good to go on that. Any basketball thoughts here, Greg, or should we just dive right into baseball?
We're pretty short on time, so let's dive into baseball. Try to plow through this. Let's
hit the highlights. There was a strategy show. Of course, there was the early bird going through all of the pitching, but let's hit some of the high notes here. Let's start off with the trio of top end options here. We have Trevor Bauer going against Yu Darvish. So win share, a little dicey for either of those guys, but the strikeouts definitely will be there. We've got a slight breeze blowing in from 10 miles an hour, 8 to 10 from center field, and it's going to be about 64 to 67 degrees at first pitch there in Chicago. And then on the other side, we do have the roof open in Arizona. That should not hinder Clayton Kershaw too much. 5.8 implied run total, backing him up. I like his win odds, almost minus 300. We know he's going to go long enough. He should go long enough to qualify for the win there. He's got his strikeout stuff. He's becoming a crafty pitcher, still setting things up well. He's not the dominant ace that he was, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. How are you going to rank these top 3 guys? Do you want to play 2 of them on DK? Because I know that's how you like to roll.
Yeah, so I have plenty of exposure to all of them. The one I actually like the most right now is going to be Kershaw for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think they're all very viable options today, and you can't go wrong with any of them. With that said, we have Darvish and Bauer both coming in close to 50% on DraftKings, and Kershaw is 27%, so almost half the ownership of those guys. And the other thing to consider too, and this might impact the ownership a little bit, but Ketel Marte was just scratched from the Diamondbacks lineup. So we're already talking about one of the weakest offenses in baseball, and Marte was scratched. I mean, this was literally like 2 minutes ago. This was just as we were about to log on. I saw Marte was scratched, and I was getting info on that just as we were about to start. So for that reason, this is a weak lineup that's already weaker than normal. And just looking at the ownership difference, I think it makes a lot of sense to go to Kershaw in tournaments.
Right. Yeah, looks like sore wrist. So interesting on that one. Let's see. We do have some free stuff today. I know everybody's going to like that. And then I want to hit this real quick, just a reminder because it expires tonight. So the MLB Top Stack tool is free. We'll turn our attention to that shortly. I can drop that link into Slack or into the YouTube chat, but you guys can go get it as well. If you go to awesemo.com, go to the top banner where it says MLB, hover over that. Click on MLB Top Stacks tool, and you'll get access to it right now. Promo code that I want to let you guys know about is promo code SLEEPER. That expires tonight. That is 25% off the 1 month of Awesemo NFL DFS content. So that gets you 4 weeks for the price of 3, which is a good deal. It'll get you through week 4. We're also tossing in the Awesemo draft kit as well as part of that purchase. Jump in there and get that now. That one's going away tonight at midnight. So promo code SLEEPER gets you 25% off the 1 month of Awesemo NFL. We've got all the sports today. NFL Premium DFS. We're throwing in the season-long draft package. And apparently there was a little bit of a kerfluffle on some best ball stuff over there on DraftKings, giving away free tickets. Hey, I jumped in a contest because I got a free ticket in my account yesterday. And I was going to message you and I was going to message Adam and say, is it always this week And mine wasn't necessarily that it was soft. There were some silly picks, but I had only done one draft there. But the last 2 rounds, people were picking players that were on injured reserve or not going to play this year. Why are they doing that? And they weren't on auto pick. I'm just like, what are you? There's no waivers, guys. There's no waivers here.
I was in a draft today where somebody took Damian Williams in the 3rd round. So it's like totally ridiculous. And there was like, I was in a draft where, I mean, I've seen like Tom Brady go 2nd overall. I was in a draft earlier also where Aaron Rodgers went 3rd overall. So, I mean, I want to get to the baseball too, because we're running out of time, but point being, because we're overall just providing value in this industry is I think it makes a ton of sense to get in on some of those DraftKings best balls right now. The wingman tool that we have on Awesemo is really helpful. I've been using that for some of the slower drafts and checking off the players as they go. But that's a really good way to get value and edge on the field right now, because there are people with free tickets jumping in that have no clue what the hell they're doing, and they're picking all kinds of random players.
All right, so that bought me some time there. I got the top pitchers percentage up. I just dropped the top stacks tool, which is free in the Slack chat. See, we're leveraging, we're selling stuff, we're giving you guys value, telling you how you can utilize some of this free stuff. Now we're gonna really get serious here. Number 4 most popular option here, at least from a top pitcher percentage, is Dane Dunning. He is right there at 13.2% with Tommy Milone, who has not done well in his first 2 starts with his new team, Atlanta. He does get to go against Miami, but at 9,200, that still doesn't feel great. And then right behind them, we've got Zach Davies, who suddenly is striking people out at nearly double his career rate, particularly against righties. Of that trio of hurlers, what do you like best? For me, it's going to be Dunning, Davies, and I'm not a fan of Milone. He has 29 over there on Yahoo, though, so he is in play there.
Yeah, I think Milone is okay. It's hard to get really thrilled about the 9,200 price tag on him, though. I'd rather pay up for Kershaw, Bauer, and Darvish. I'm kind of updating some of my pitcher exposures right now just because I didn't fully update it for the Kershaw news with him going up against, Marte and the D-backs playing a weaker lineup now. So I'm upping my exposure to Kershaw right now. I think it makes a lot of sense, though, if you have the available cap space, just go up to like Kershaw or Bauer from Milone. I mean, the 1,300 price difference, it's hard to imagine that Malone's going to outpitch those guys enough to the point where he ends up on an optimal lineup. I agree with you. I think Dane Dunning's a really strong option. Even at the, what is it right now, 19% projected ownership for Dunning, it's too low because he's been a guy who, this is his most expensive price tag, is $6,500. We've seen him at $4,500, $4,800, $5,800. He's basically done really well in all those starts except for one, former top prospect, a guy with strikeout stuff. And in a favorable matchup against the Pirates, I think that he makes a lot of sense as an SP2, especially because we look at the rest of the options on the slate and they are pretty lacking. There is not really any other cheap starting pitcher that I feel all that confident in. Do you feel any different? Is there a cheap starting pitcher you look at outside of Dunning and is like, oh, I'm really confident in this guy?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not. So I'm just uploading all my stuff here. So let me see. So I started looking from the bottom up because sometimes that's what you have to do just to see, okay, who pops? Nobody does, and I'm getting like 8 guys up. So let's talk about them and then let's throw them away. So Taylor Clark, intriguing option. He's got the cheap price point, but he's going against the Dodgers with the roof open. We already said they have, a 5.7 or 5.8 implied run total. 5% guy at the most. Luis Garcia, this is how much respect he gets. DK is still using Luis Garcia's picture for him. There's 2 Luis Garcias. They're both rookies. One's an infielder for the Nationals. They're using his picture for the Houston pitcher on their player card. Not really a fan of his going against Houston. This will just, or against Oakland. This will just be his second appearance. And by the way, this is only the second time he's ever pitched above A, or high A. No AA, no AAA. Tough ask for him, 5%er. Antonio Senzatella averages, a whole lot of when he's on the road. About a 1 point, I'm going off the top of my head, but I think his road stats for the last 2 years, like 170 innings, like a 1.4 home runs, 50% ground ball rate, like a 5 ERA and about a 5 xFIP. He's not great. He's going against a revamped San Diego team. I can't get excited about that. Kyle Cody, same thing. Can't get excited about him going against the Halos. Yes, the Angels are a team we can pick on from time to time, but we know where their production's coming from. Maybe we play both sides of that one, but I don't feel great about it. But he is 5,400. 7,400, he's a 0 guy for me. 5,400, 5 or 10%. Jorge Lopez, Baltimore against the Mets. Lopez bounced around for a couple different organizations. He came over as part of the Moustakas deal to Milwaukee. They released him. He was claimed by Baltimore. He's had like one decent season where he's performed, and the rest of the time he's languished in the minors. Not happy about him. I like the Mets. Julio Teheran gives up power to everybody, but he is in Texas. Here's the first guy I'm going to pause for a moment and say, is Julio Teheran going to be in our lives? Because we've got 3 really good guys, 2 question marks in a youngster, Dunning and Zach Davies. And then we got a whole lot of, I could still keep going on guys that are just terrifying when it comes to pitching. How do you feel about a veteran going against a weak Texas lineup?
Well, actually, the Rangers are my highest on offense tonight. So
and there we go.
So I kind of think that, but I kind of think it's a thing where I don't think it makes 0 sense, because I do think the Rangers are going to be a bit popular just because of how the slate shakes out. The pitching options clearly tend towards being the more expensive ones or the better plays today, and you need a cheap offense. And you look at Teheran versus the Rangers, something has to give, right? Like, they can't just both be bad on the same night. Both of them are bad every single night, but something has to give tonight where either Teheran is going to get them out or they're going to get hits against them. I'm tending to lead towards the Rangers side of the game just because I don't think that Teheran can get major league hitters out consistently at this point in his career. And the Rangers bats are so cheap tonight that just lets me get in some of those some of those pitchers that I really like. So my pitcher exposure right now, I really only have exposure to 4 guys, and that's Kershaw, Darvish, Dunning, and Bauer. I have some other guys mixed in at like 5% or less, but for the most part, the only guys I'm really invested in are those 4 pitchers. And I just need a spot to save salary. And I look at the prices on the Rangers bats, and they just came out in a lot of my lineups.
All right. We'll go through where I'm going with my percentages here in just a sec, but let's keep going up this list here. The one thing to be careful of with Luis Garcia is just make sure you're getting the right projections on him. I think it's Luis A. Garcia and Luis D. Garcia, and it's just been wreaking havoc with everybody's VLOOKUPs in this, let alone pictures. I'm looking at you, DraftKings. So that gets us up to Teheran. None of those guys are above like 1%. I'm setting them each at 5 just to see what happens when I run my crunch. Pablo Lopez. All right, now we get an intriguing guy. He's going against Atlanta. I'd love to see him $1,000 less. Difficult matchup against Atlanta. At least we know he should get us 80-plus pitches, could qualify for the win, but he's got a tough matchup there against Atlanta. And then that gets us up to Nick Margevicius, who is in San Francisco. Now, Margevicius has been much better this season. I'm trying to get his name right, so I've been watching, and I'm a Mariners fan, so I've watched his last 2 starts. He's actually decent. He's not he left behind the crappiness in San Diego, and he brought pure mediocrity at this point. He's part of that 6-man Mariners rotation with 4 lefties. He's one of the 4 lefties. I'm okay with him at 6,900 going to 10% just because I need some percentages here. But it's not exciting. And San Francisco, not a fun place to pitch, but it's going to be very cold there tonight. It's going to be about 60 degrees. I think that has a big impact on hitting, which should help pitching and at least neutralize the juice balls that are out there. Hashtag tinfoil conspiracies.
If I get into the mid-range, I don't mind Pablo Lopez just because he's actually pitched well. Like you said, the matchup is extremely difficult pitching in Atlanta. So it's not somebody I want to have a ton of in my lineups, and I don't, but I have some exposure to him just because, he's striking out about a hitter per inning this year, 3.05 ERA, 2.56 FIP. So I think that Lopez is actually decent. And then we get into some of those other pitchers that are in the low range where it's either bad pitchers or ones in really tough matchups. And at least Lopez is good, right? So I think that that's one thing that we could put as a feather in his cap. So if I had to roster one pitcher today who wasn't in the group of Kershaw, Darvish, Dunning, Bauer, then Lopez is my guy. Not a ton of confidence in him, but I think he's the one that has the most upside.
Let's talk a minute just here on the weather, because I see someone rightfully so teasing me a freezing 60 degrees in chat. It's all about perspective. So this is cooler than we've seen. If we had done a full season here, we would have remembered that in late March and April, as we see 2 or 3 games canceled because of snow, we would remember that pitching or hitting does much worse when it's cold weather. 60 degrees is not cold weather, but for perspective, the last couple homestands, it's been in the low upper 70s, low 80s for San Francisco. We've seen a lot of home runs and stuff hit there. You guys have already heard my cockamamie theories on that. But I think that this is one worth pointing out because these are kind of the mediocre pitchers. If this was last year, we'd be saying jam these guys in, utilize them, hope they only give up a couple runs and go 5 innings. That's like a wonderful statement to say about everybody pitching in the COVID year here, and they're not all in good spots. So that all of a sudden has become a good performance. So I think it's important to call those things out, just like it's important to call out Texas as becoming a pitching haven, partially because they have a new stadium that has a roof, partially because the Texas offense is so bad. But with us, all of a sudden, normally we'd be starting to hear whispers about who's going to make the All-Star team. We've got 2 weeks left of the season. So everything's kind of screwed up and our perspective screwed up that it's getting cooler again than it was. And we just don't remember that from the beginning because we started, right in the middle of a heat season. So I do want to point out weather is a big factor. And you guys just didn't hear us harp on that for 3 weeks at the beginning of the season like we normally do. So anyway, quick interjection there. Back to you.
Yeah, it is pretty funny because the other thing with Texas is historically it's actually played, even when it was a really hitter-friendly park, it played as a neutral to slightly pitcher's park in the first 6 weeks or so of the season. But we don't have that part of the season anymore just because it started at such a different time of the year. But usually just because of the cooler weather, it started as being not nearly a hitter's park. And then once you got into the months of, July and August, it became a really hitter-friendly park. And now we're kind of getting back into the part where it's cooling off again because just the season takes place at a totally different part of the year this season. So that's also just something else to note. And then also, obviously, like you said, the roof, that's going to have an impact also.
All right, let's talk about some top stacks here. We got about 28 minutes to go. Don't believe me, I want San Francisco all to myself. Well, I went to sleep last night and didn't see their score. It turns out there was some fireworks towards the end of the game. Still only 11 runs. That's still below their average for this season. Just saying, guys, let's not get too carried away. Although I did see, I was tagged in a couple articles where some San Francisco writers were talking about how many home runs they've been hitting this year. Some other loyal viewers pointed that out to us. Always fun there. Okay, so let's look at the top stack tool. I'm going to drop that link. Just drop that there into chat. Again, that is free today. Anything else you want to mention on pitching? We kind of worked our way up through most of that scary list. I guess we didn't really. Rick Porcello, Rick Porcello at 7,900 is going to be a 10% guy for me. Jesus Luzardo is a 10% guy. Davies is 30%. Brubaker, Malone are 5. Margavicius and Pablo Lopez are 10. Everybody else is 5. And then 40 for Dunning, Kershaw, Bauer, and Darvish. That's giving me about 240%. That'll get me what I need to do for my 200% of pitching allocation here on DraftKings. So I'm comfortable with that. Does anything stand out, or did we miss on anything, or shall we spend time on some bats?
We could go to the bats. Like I said, my pitching is pretty concentrated, and I like Darvish, Bauer, Kershaw, and Dunning. And it's just hard for me to be confident in really anybody else today. I like Pablo Lopez a little bit, except not enough to make a real significant investment in.
All right. Top stack of the night coming in from percentage-wise. So there's 3 columns that you guys will see on this. I'm looking at the DK one since that's where my lineups are going to be. You have the top stacks percentage. So that basically tells you what is the chance they're going to have for being the top stack, right? Makes sense. Top value means what is the chance they're going to have to be the top point per dollar stack. So you can see that all of a sudden the Dodgers go from likely being the best scoring stack to one of the worst when it comes to value. That's not a bad thing. It's just a reminder that their bats are all expensive, and we can't just worry about, hey, play, here it is, play the best and most expensive players, sit back and cash. Well, we've got a salary cap, so we've got to start making some decisions. So that kind of helps you there, and it shows that Texas is by far has the best chance to be the best point per dollar stack, almost double everybody else. Probably why Greg's getting a lot of them in his lineups, because he's going for the expensive pitchers. And then the optimizers are coming in and looking, hey, what are the best point per dollar stacks I can give him? It's going to be Texas. And then ownership share. That tells us what is the cumulative ownership there coming in on the average player in the stacks. Now, that can sometimes be misleading. So like Texas is coming in super high owned. What we want to go look at and see is which players for Texas is that going to be. My guess is, I haven't opened it up yet, but while I'm getting there, I'm assuming Joey Gallo is going to be one of those guys. But why can
so on DraftKings, Leody Taveras is leading off at 2,100.
And he is 24%. Joey Gallo is 27. Yeah. Urukned Odur, the older one, not his brother, same name, different middle initial. He is 17%, and then Anderson Tejada, 12%. Everybody else is single digits. So you can see it's heavily concentrated in those four guys. All you would have to do if you wanted to be unique amongst the other Texas lineups stacks is to leave out Tavares or Gallo. I'd probably skip Tavares because if Gallo gets a home run, I'll keep him in my lineup for the block, try to beat those guys elsewhere with somebody else, because who knows what Tavares is going to perform with. That would be the way I would do it if I was only hand building a few lineups. What is your approach when you're kind of looking at how do you use the stacks tool, since it's free and we have some nice extreme outlier examples tonight with Texas and Dodgers?
Yeah, so I think one thing that you might have noticed, especially in the last couple of Sunday shows, is a couple things also. So when I build my lineups, I generally tend to gravitate towards the most expensive pitchers. That's where I feel are the safest ways to get value play, to get just points per dollar and to get fantasy points is the high-end pitchers. They rarely have bad outings. Like the odds that Clayton Kershaw gets bombed by the Diamondbacks today is very low percentage. He's a safe play. So I generally tend to focus more on the values. And then something else that you've probably realized as we do our shows together is I usually try to look for an offense that I think is going to be low owned that also has upside. Like on Sunday, remember, I really liked the Tigers. They were like 1.5% owned, and they ended up being one of my highest owned offenses, and they scored, it was like 10 or 11 runs they finished with. So I did really well that day. Now here's the issue I have with tonight, because this is going to be contrary to what I usually do, is Texas is so overwhelmingly the top value in terms of how I'm looking at them, that it's hard, even though they're projected to be really chalky, it's hard for me to get off them because I can't find another offense for cheap that I really like today. So I'm going to be overweight to Texas, and that's just the stance I'm taking. I understand they're going to be chalky. I'm going to be like double the field on a lot of their players, and I just hope they go off because I can't find another cheap offense that I'm really comfortable with today.
All right, we're still waiting on the Seattle lineup. I'm going to run some of my crunches here. So I'm looking at it. I don't see anybody injured. I'm just trying to guess as to why they have not put that out there. I didn't realize they had Phillip Ervin, and I don't know that I've seen him play yet for Seattle. He did play yesterday. Came in a pinch hit for them. Looks like he started one game in the Texas series as well. So they just have kind of a cast of thousands. Maybe they're trying to figure out who they're going to play. So I was just seeing, sometimes when we were dealing with the Angels, we wanted to make sure we were getting somebody out of the optimizer because it becomes kind of a pain to try to fix it. I'm just looking at these guys. I don't think I'm going to get very many of any of them, so I'm not that worried about it. I hate trying to fix things later in the night.
I don't mind the Mariners as a stack today, actually. I have some exposure to them. I don't like them nearly as much as the Rangers, but just in terms of trying to get other cheap pitchers into my lineups, like Tyler Anderson, there's a couple of reasons. First, Tyler Anderson I don't think is particularly good, and he's actually coming in as somewhat popular today, which I kind of think makes sense just because people will look at the pricing for the slate. And if you're looking for a cheap pitcher who's not Dane Dunning, Tyler Anderson just kind of stands out because of his matchup against the Mariners. But if we look at Tyler Anderson's numbers this year, I mean, he's a 5.17 ERA, a 4.84 FIP. Last year, he had an 11.76 ERA. That was pitching for Colorado, so some of those outings came at Coors Field, so it's a little inflated. But still, I think I look at that, and Tyler Anderson projected for 20% ownership, and that just kind of makes me gravitate towards the Mariners a little bit. The other thing also with Seattle is with their lineup dropping so late, they're not going to have like any ownership because people are going to go into lock. They want to set their lineups. And this is something that I've noticed a lot over the last couple of years is if there's a team that's kind of a fringe option and the lineup doesn't come out by lock, just nobody rosters them.
No, and that's a very valid point because you just watched me go through the mindset of I don't really want to put
which is kind of why I like them. That's kind of what made me think of it. It's I don't have like nearly as much exposure to them as I do to the Rangers, but I have 8% Mariners stacks right now compared to compared to 4% projected ownership for a stack on the field. So, I mean, I have about double exposure to the Mariners that the field has. And I think that's a good stance to take just because I think it's a decent spot against Tyler Anderson, and Tyler Anderson's projected to have a little bit of ownership. So he's at 20% projected ownership about. So He's projected to be the fifth highest owned pitcher on the slate today.
All right. For those of you that have us minimized in a window somewhere or who are just listening and not watching, we're in the midst of a flash sale here. Right now, you can get Awesemo Plus NFL 1 week of the premium NFL package for $3. This is your last chance promo to get in for week 1. This is going to expire at 10 o'clock tonight. The promo code is Odell, Odell, like Odell Beckham. So there you go. $3, 1 week, all NFL access that expires at 10 o'clock tonight. That's 80% off the regular price. If you are not signing up for this and you do not have any sort of Awesemo package, you're crazy. We have so many slates for week 1 starting Thursday night, Thursday through Monday. We've got the early NFL slate, the all-day NFL slate, the through Monday night slate, the Monday night slate, and there's 2 Monday night games. So there's going to be gigantic slate for that as well, plus showdowns for all of the above. Jump on in there, promo code Odell, $3. You're crazy to not give us a try. All right. I'm looking back here.
I will never hear Beckham's name and not laugh again, by the way.
Why?
It's impossible to take him seriously after the story that came out the other day.
What story?
Oh, you're gonna have to look it up afterwards. I can't even.
Oh, it's so good you can't even tell me. Is this like a Jamal Murray story, or is this a different one?
It's like Jamal Murray times 10. It's
okay. Well,
it's like Jamal Murray if Brown was involved.
All right. Well, in that, darn it, show's ending early tonight. I need to go check this out. Jeez, I'm busy. I'm doing stuff, so I guess I have missed out on the fun stuff there. I almost want to just talk while you look up the Odell Beckham thing, and we can just get a reaction from you without saying anything as I talk about baseball. All right, I'm looking it up. So
fantastic. All right, this is good. This is right in my wheelhouse. All right, so in terms of stacks today, so for cheaper stacks, I have a lot of Rangers just because it matches with the pitchers that I have exposure to. The Mariners, that was a good facial reaction from you.
He's playing for the perfect team.
Yeah, I think here's the. So I've been thinking of a new nickname for Odell Beckham. I think I'm going to the UPS man. What can Brown do for you?
What can Brown do for you? Oh, yes, the Cleveland Steamers. All right. Well, wow, we're off the rails now. That's painful. Hit the like button now. This might be my last show. Hopefully Tom's not watching. We'll see. We'll cut this out in post-production. All right.
So I was just saying in terms of the overall stacks, we got 10 minutes left. The overall stacks that I like a lot in terms of ones that match up with pitchers, I've mentioned the Rangers, the Mariners. It's just hard to find other really cheap teams where we could jam in some of those expensive pitchers with. I don't think that the Pirates are a terrible play. If we look at the overall, comparing the top value percentage to the ownership share, which is something that I like to do a decent amount when I'm looking at the top stacks tools, I'll look at a couple things. If there's cheaper pitchers I like, I'm going to focus more on the overall top stack percentage. So the chance it just has a team to be the highest scoring team of the slate, because I don't really need to prioritize value on offense if there's cheap pitchers I like. But then if there's a slate like today where there's more expensive pitchers I like, I'm going to focus more on the value. So today where I'm looking more at the value, I'm going to compare some of the value percentages to the ownership share. And just because the Pirates have a 9% chance to be the top value stack on the slate compared to a 5% ownership share as a stack, that kind of makes them stand out a little bit to me as a team where there's a little bit of leverage in rostering on this slate.
All right, chat really liked that. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I missed that story, if only so we could talk about it now. But hit that like button, hit that thumbs up. Come on, well worth it. Well worth it. Just have a little fun at my expense here. All right, so we got 10 minutes left, 10 and change.
I'm happy I got to set you up, by the way.
That I'm so glad I could be the foil here for this one. That worked out nicely. That was quite interesting, to say the least. It's hard to recover from that, but we will. I'm looking here. What teams, you mentioned Texas. If you were not completely focused on Texas, what would you look to stack? For me, it's going to be San Diego. They're expensive, but I really, really, really like them. I am now going to hand build a few Texas, or probably a few San Diego stacks, just so I can make sure I get some in my lineups. Is there any team like that that you feel is worthy of just going in and hand building a few stacks if you're doing 150?
So I'll say this: if you're looking at the Padres, you want to focus on the left-handed bats for them because they're going up against Antonio Senzatella. He's actually pretty decent against right-handed batters, but he just doesn't get lefties out at all, which is kind of interesting then because you could build contrarian Padres stacks just based on focusing on the lefties, because generally when you're building, Padres stacks, there's going to be a focus on Fernando Tatis. There's going to be a focus on Manny Machado just because those are the best hitters in the offense. Trent Grisham usually gets some ownership, but then you move down. Mitch Moreland at 3,800, Cronenworth at 4,000. Those are two guys that make sense. Jurickson Profar has actually played pretty well this year. He's at 3,500 at the bottom of the order. I don't mind him even in the 9th hole. One thing that's really interesting about the Padres this year is literally 1 to 9 in the lineup. They don't have bad hitters. The lineup is good everywhere, and there's very few teams that are like that in the league where there's just no weak link. Like no matter who you're rostering in the Padres lineup, there's a good hitter before them, there's a good hitter after them. So you could really stack anybody 1 through 9, and I don't take an issue with it. I would focus on the lefties, like I said, and I think that if you only focus on the lefties, you can build a fairly contrarian lineup. In terms of other stacks,
if for those of you following along, I just dropped the link again. Top Stacks tool is free today, and on the screen you'll see one of the visuals. It has built out a nice little bar graph here showing so you can visually see where people are versus top stack versus top value stack, which is helpful. And I hadn't realized we had that until last week. So there we go. Back to you.
I don't mind the who was I going to say? Oh, I don't mind the A's today. They aren't all that expensive. Like you said, they're going up against Garcia. And I mean, this isn't something that I look at as a great metric or anything like that. When somebody has the wrong picture of the pitcher on DraftKings, it's probably a good indication this isn't a very highly regarded player. Garcia only 6,200. The A's aren't garnering that much ownership. They also have implied run total of just under 5 runs. So it's one of the higher implied run totals of the night. And if you look through the A's lineup, it's not all that expensive. There are some individually expensive hitters, but I mean, there's also Machine is 2,500, so he's one of the cheaper starters on the slate tonight. Tony Kemp is only 2,200. Laureano, who's always a guy who I think is decent upside for DFS. He's been a little bit down this year compared to last year, but still a guy with power and speed upside. 4,100 batting third. Marcus Semien, 4,200 batting second. Matt Chapman is in the lineup, but still overall, I think it's a good spot for the A's, and the pricing isn't too ridiculous. So you could fairly comfortably fit in like Kershaw, Dunning, and an A's stack.
All right. I just made some Mets stacks, another team that I like, the Metropolitans, leaving out Robbie Cano, but they have power up and down their lineup.
We do have the Mariners lineup now, by the way.
Oh.
So I'm just pulling that up. I just saw that it got confirmed in the...
Let's see, Crawford, Moore, Lewis, Seager, France, White, Torrens, Jose. Sorry, not even going to try that last name. And Filler did make the lineup at batting 9th. So wait for the old cruncher to let me know when that's ready. I feel like I'm missing a team. Let's go build some San Diego stacks here. Oh, sorry, San Francisco. I already did San Diego.
San Francisco does have a pretty high implied run total today.
Let's see. From Premium Chat, on FanDuel, I'm finding it doable to make some Mets and White Sox stacks while fitting in Kershaw. Any thoughts on doing that tonight? I think that is a phenomenal way to go. The more relaxed pricing that we see on FanDuel will allow you to do things like that. And that's something that's very helpful where you can go in, utilize that to your advantage. And sometimes the optimizers won't quite do it. When you're building by hand, you can sort of make those decisions. How big of a gap do I want between the players? If I can get that double stack, but only one of them can be a 3-man stack and I have to get a super cheap guy in there, am I okay with that? Well, you can answer that question where an optimizer is going to spit out a bunch of lineups. And it depending on what you're doing, may or may not get you where you want. And it'll give you what you tell it to do. That may not be what you want. So I think that's a good way to do it. And I do like having both those teams around Kershaw.
The funny thing about last night, just talking about how relaxed the pricing is on FanDuel, the winning lineup in the $77 yesterday had Lance Lynn as the pitcher, so he's one of the most expensive pitchers, and then it was a Padres-Dodgers stack. So a 4x4 stack. So you had one of the most expensive pitchers with the two most expensive offenses that had the two highest implied run totals of the night. And there it was, not anything too complex. It was, and Lanson was also the highest owned pitcher on FanDuel last night. So you basically had the most expensive offenses that were both the two highest owned, and one of the most expensive pitchers that was the highest owned. And there was your first place lineup.
Oh, FanDuel never change.
Mostly also because, and I was underweight to the Dodgers last night. So something that was really annoying was that I was sitting really, really well right before I went to bed last night. And then I went to brush my teeth and came back. It was like, oh, the game went to extra innings and the Dodgers scored a bunch of runs in extra innings and everybody's 30% owned.
Oh, that is always a rough one when that happens. How many, what would you go for Mariner stacks? Would you go with 4-mans or would you go 5-mans? I know you like the 5-mans, but.
So yeah, I only have 5-man stacks. I mean, obviously we're talking DraftKings. On FanDuel, different story because you can't make 5-man stacks.
Right.
But yeah, I have a handful of 5-man stacks. Mariners, let's see which players are in them.
You get a lot of Dylan Moore is why I asked.
I do have a lot of Dylan Moore because he's pretty cheap on DraftKings. He's only 3,500. The other thing also is he has multi-position eligibility. He's second base and outfield, so that gives him a little more flexibility. Ty France, who's batting fifth, is only 4,000. He's another guy with multi-positional eligibility, first base and third base. And France is a pretty decent hitter. He's somebody who I think kind of goes under the radar by the public, especially because he's on the Mariners now, was on the Padres in previous years, so not necessarily high-profile spots. And he became expendable when the Padres just have so much firepower in their offense, and he was in the Austin Nola trade. So I think that he makes sense for the Mariners also. The three guys that have the most exposure from there are Kyle Lewis, Dylan Moore, and Ty France.
Okay. It's hard to get. Seager's having a nice year, which is surprising. He's just passed Jay Buhner for fourth most franchise hits.
The issue is that he's one of the only expensive hitters in that lineup, other than Kyle Lewis. But I think Kyle Lewis is much better than Seager. So Lewis is more of a priority for me than Seager is.
Yeah, and you get the lefty-lefty, which Seager is just okay in lefty-lefties. He's not anything to write home about. Let's see. I'm going to export my lineups. And we're good to go. See how the old hotel Wi-Fi paid for the premium here. I was hoping they would have a little connector where I could plug in.
You have a ridiculously clear picture for being at a hotel. It's been blowing my mind ever since. I've never seen hotel Wi-Fi that clean before.
Well, I did bring my good camera down with me, but it's the same one I use for other shows. So we'll see. Perhaps it's sliding, or perhaps it's because I'm so ruggedly handsome.
Yeah, that's
sorry. My
probably
wife's choking in the other room. Now she's flipping me off. Awesome. There we go.
All right. I was gonna make an Odell Beckham joke, but I won't say anything.
Oh, she can't hear. She can only hear what I'm saying, and she has earphones in, so I don't know what she's doing. If she could hear me, she would be flipping me off. So she's flipping me off officially. Love you, sweetie.
Tell her to do it again for me.
Greg would like you to do that one more time for him.
Fantastic.
She's not. There we go. Haha. So she's
you win.
Tonight. I win. There we are. All right. Am I staying at the Holiday Inn Express? No, it's not. It's Marriott. I don't remember which kind, but there are many kinds of Marriotts. This is one of them. Let's see. All right. I successfully uploaded my lineups. Let's see. We've got a few. Let me put some questions. I didn't sign into our account, so I can't pop the little question window out here. Let's see. Chat says, hello, sweetie. Well, they say hello, Mrs. Mac, but I'm translating. Smash that like button. Yes, we have 409. We'll definitely want to do that. Let's see. Albie's at 3K. Oh, did Albies, is he in the lineup? I knew they were going to activate him potentially today.
Yeah, Albie's batting eighth. I have some exposure to him.
There we go. 3K on DK.
So the only issue I have is just, like I said before, I think that Pablo Lopez is pretty decent. So I have some exposure to the Braves. I guess they're pretty low owned. They only have 4% ownership as a team stack. It's just an issue of that. I think there are better spots. The Braves are fairly expensive outside of Albies, and I just don't think it's a great matchup. So there's other teams that were higher priorities for me. I have some Albies exposure, except it's a pretty small number, and I only have a couple Braves stacks.
All right, reminder, we got a couple minutes left, but it's the top stacks tool that is free today. Also, we're running out of time here for our promo code SLEEPER. That will get you 25% off 1 month of Awesemo NFL content. We will throw in the draft kit for free. That is promo code SLEEPER. That ends tonight. Also ending at 10 o'clock is promo code Odell. And I know that Joey was the one that most likely picked that promo code, but that is $3 for 1 week of Awesemo NFL content. If
one of the better promo codes he's come up with.
There have been a few, but that one, I didn't know why we picked it. Now I know, and as G.I. Joe says, knowing is half the battle. Let's see. Alex Caruso is with us tonight. That is always fun, having him in the crowd. I got third in I didn't see the contest tonight, but for NBA, for the, they had some sort of Jose Cuervo contest or something. I got third in it for like 40 or 50 bucks. Not bad for a free roll there. Out of
Did they send you Jose Cuervo?
No, but I could utilize my winnings to go buy that if I would like.
That is true.
That would be well placed. Just seeing if there's any other questions coming in here. I think everybody's pretty casual here. Who had the over-under for a G.I. Joe reference? When I think of G.I. Joe, I think of the little cartoon G.I. Joe, not the movie G.I. Joe. I'm sure you just think of the movie G.I. Joe.
I just think of the little action figures.
Yeah, the short ones. They used to be like 12 feet tall or 12 inches tall ones that were just giants, like kind of the counter to the Barbies.
12 feet tall. It's funny though, because even though you say 12 feet tall and didn't actually mean it, do you remember like being 3 years old or whatever? And the point of reference, everything seemed massive when you're that age. Like everything, like adults, everything seemed just ridiculously tall. Like basketball hoops, that seemed like some unreachable net.
Oh, completely. We had one of the I grew up in a very tiny town. I've talked about it before, but one of the guys that would come babysit us, he was in high school. He was like the star of the basketball team, and he was like 6'3" or 6'4". So we would make him take us 2 blocks over to the park by our house, and we had these Nerf basketballs that we would play with, but they were like those harder Nerf footballs, but they made basketball versions of them. So we had those, and he could palm it. So he would go do all crazy sort of reverse dunks and 360s and stuff like that. And we thought it was just amazing because we could never fathom getting that high. And even when he'd lift us up, he couldn't quite get us high enough so we could dunk, because I was about 5 and my brother was about 4. So, but yes, those were fun times. Nothing crazy coming in. We didn't mention no real weather that I'm concerned about here. The only thing was it's just a little cold, maybe a little drizzly there in Chicago, but I'm not going to worry about that. Let's see what the latest is there. Should be no precipitation. So just over.
Yeah, the implied run total for the Cubs-Reds game is so low, which makes sense. It's Darvish versus Bauer. Bauer has an ERA like 2.03 or something like that. Darvish's ERA is below 2. It's like 1.4. So 6.5 implied run total there. I think that's the lowest of the season so far, and rightfully so.
All right, that's going to get us up here to lock. So if I remember correctly, tonight we're going to have the golf strategy show, and I think MMA strategy show as well. Tomorrow night, of course, NFL opens up. So jump on in and utilize that 1 week for $3 promo code Odell, or 1 month for 25% off. And we're throwing in the NFL draft kit. There's still best balls out there to be had. Apparently soft competition, according to Twitter, but that is promo code SLEEPER. For that one.
Yeah, I'm almost positive I drafted the $1 million team while we were doing this show. I'm like 90% sure I won the $1 million. It's over.
You were super multitasking then. I'm truly impressed. I've done one draft so far. I have one more. They gave me another ticket, so I'm going to use that. And we'll see. They're trying to entice me. I didn't do that much this year. Last year I did like 200 drafts over on Draft. I've only done the one best ball so far this year. We'll see. But with that, we're going to get on out of here. Hat tip to Jordan Klein for producing as always. Thank you, Greg. You're going to be seeing a lot of Greg and I on the weekends again. We're doing the Sunday night live before lock showdown NFL specials starting this Sunday. So that will be a good time. And of course, subscribe and like. We have so much content coming out here on YouTube. You do not want to miss that. But with that, gamers, good luck.